Welcome to the Sloth Investor podcast with your host, Mr. Sloth.
Welcome everyone to episode 23 of the Sloth Investor podcast. And today I'm really fortunate to be joined by Rob Phelan, who is the author of a fantastic children's book, M is for Money. Really looking forward to this discussion. Rob, how are you?
I am doing wonderful and so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
It's great. It's a book that's on my child's bookshelf, and it's a book we've enjoyed reading on numerous occasions. It's a fantastic book. So perhaps I could begin by asking you, Rob, what inspired you to write this book?
Couple of things. So first off, I have a 3-year-old at home, and around shortly after he was born is when I started taking more of an interest in what are the resources available for teaching young kids about money. Because I'm a personal finance teacher. I teach at a high school in Maryland in the US, and I was teaching high school kids personal finance and realizing that the conversation really needed to start happening a lot younger. And if it could happen younger, by the time they got to high school, they would be much more prepared for the level of conversation I wanted to have with them to help prepare them for financial independence right before, they make those big financial decisions of college, house, marriage, cars, that sort of thing. And in my research, I was finding, well, kids as young as 3 years old can actually start learning basic money concepts and start learning about money, which of course makes sense. They learn all about the world from a very young age. And why should money be any different? And then started looking, well, what's available for this age group? And there just wasn't much. There was a handful of books that were out there at the time, like a classic Bernstein Bears one, maybe a Dr. Seuss one that are cute, but don't really do anything significant when it comes to teaching kids about money. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try and do this myself. I'm going to try and bring this children's book to life. And at the same time, I was running my own business called The Simple Startup, where I help young entrepreneurs learn about money young entrepreneurs start their own businesses. And this was an experiment for me and them to see, well, here's how you can start a business for free. So this is actually a fun thing. I did not put any of my own money after like all of the things are said and done into making this book come to life. It was totally crowdfunded, which was an awesome thing to be able to say.
Yeah, fantastic. And like you say, it just provides such a fantastic foundation for young children. And like you say, later on in life, the teenage years and into the adult years, there are those things such as marriage and, mortgage and college fees and buying your first car, etc. And, they are really key, financial touchstones. But if we can just embed those really key foundational terms within, someone's life from that very young age, I think it's critically important. And I just love the kind of the structure of the book, that the alphabetical A to Z structure that you've got going on there as well. So would you be able to perhaps touch upon that a little bit for our listeners as well?
It's exactly what you said. We're not trying to teach complicated topics at a young age. We're just trying to make money a conversation that actually happens. Because we know when we survey US adults, at least, and I'm sure it's not much different in the UK, money is not a comfortable topic to talk about in a lot of households. Many adults feel a sense of shame, embarrassment, guilt, dread, discomfort, name your feeling, and it comes up when you talk about money. And that comes down to a lot of the ways we were raised, the experiences we've had with money growing up. I know in my own household, it was rude to ask my parents about financial questions, like how much money you made, or how much does something cost, or how much is this vacation costing, or anything like that. It was like, well, it's none of your business. And you learn this almost unspoken message from a very early age that you just don't talk about money. You figure it out yourself. You don't collaborate. You don't ask questions. And many of us adults ventured out into the world and we're kind of like, okay, I just got to sort of figure this out for myself. Don't really know what I'm doing, kind of drowning over here, but I'm going to just keep swimming forward and see what happens. And I want to change that narrative for kids. And M is for Money was a way of doing that. ABC's very classic kind of kids book. So from a young age, we're working on our alphabet. We're working on introducing words and then putting a story that uses that word in context. So a typical page in M is for Money will have a focus letter, a word that is money related that goes with that letter. So A, for example, is for allowance. There'll be a definition of what an allowance is. And then there's a beautiful illustration and a mini story that shows the word being used in a positive way. And that was a big thing as well. It's like, let's show positive associations of all these money words. So kids are like, okay, money good, money's fine to talk about. I can be happy, I can use money, I can achieve my goals with it, all that sort of thing. And then the final component is my central character, Stash the Squirrel, comes in with a question for the reader. And that's an opportunity for the reader and the adult reader to kind of have a safe space to have a conversation about money, where the adult who maybe might be a little less comfortable can be like, okay, I can answer this contained question and start talking about money with my kid.
And I love the aspect of the book as well, Stash to Score, because it really just, it helps to kind of generate those kind of additional conversations with your child about a particular financial concept. I love that. And going back to what you said about, financial discussions with your family, I agree. It very much is a taboo. And, being British, I guess it's a stereotype, but, many British people were quite naturally reserved anyway. But particularly when it comes to money, I know that within my family, it just wasn't spoken about. And, I'm not afraid to say this. I've said this to people before, and I think I've mentioned it on my podcast too, but I've actually learned more from my father-in-law about money, and particularly investing, than my own father. It wasn't something I should say, sorry, that was spoken about growing up. It just really wasn't. And in terms of, even to take it a bit further in terms of the stock market, that is certainly something that wasn't spoken about. And neither of my parents invested, unfortunately. And it just not even the stock market, but so many aspects of money and finance, were just not spoken about. And just going back to the book, circling back to the book for a moment, I just really love the illustrations too. The combination of, you hit the sweet spot in terms of the terms you've chosen for the age range, which is around about 3 to 8 years old, I think, isn't it? I think it says in the back of the book. The language used, plus the illustrations, plus the incorporation of, Stash to Scroll, it just all adds up to, a fantastic blend and combination of content for children. I, commend you. That's really good. For the benefit of our listeners, I wanted to touch upon one of my favorite words, of course, being a Sloth Investor. So I particularly love your definition of the word invest, which you've selected as your word to represent the letter I, of course. And for the benefit of our listeners, here's your definition for the word invest within the book. When we use our time or money now to get something later, I should say. So again, when we use our time or money now to get something better later. Okay, so do you have any particular favorite letters from the book? For instance, are there any that really deeply resonate, words that you feel are truly essential for children to understand from a young age?
I mean, the invest one, definitely that was important to me. Like most adults be like, oh, investing, like that's not a topic you talk about with kids. Like that's a much older topic. You have to be like over 18 to invest or something dumb like that. And it's more that idea, like, you can invest your time, you can invest your money, like you're trying to grow by doing something now that will reap better rewards later. And delayed gratification is something that we can really start teaching kids from a very young age, like patience, delayed gratification, taking turns, waiting, like that all is foundation skills for investing, because as you know, like investing is a long game. Like it's not a quick fire, one click, I'm going to make a lot of money sort of thing. Like it's a long game. It's a slow game if you're going to do it right. And we want kids prep for that idea. We don't want them in a quick turnkey idea that like, oh, I'm going to invest and I'm going to make a lot of money in a day or 2 days. Like it's not Amazon. Like it's going to be a totally different thing. Favorite word I have, I think it's the one that I made up. There's one made up word in the book, and that's for K. And that is K is for kidpreneur. And I love entrepreneurship, and I think entrepreneurship for kids is so important too. It's why my other business, The Simple Startup, focuses on 10 to 18-year-olds and not on adults. A pivotal moment for me in my childhood was wanting to buy a train set, like an electric train set. And it was, I think, $100, $200, somewhere in there. And when I asked my parents for it, instead of them saying no, they said, well, we're not going to buy it for you, but if you want to go earn the money and buy it yourself, you can go do that. So they opened up that door of creating my own income. And I ended up like collecting, I was living in New York at the time, collecting bottles and cans and taking them to a local bottle bank and just exchanging them for quarters, nickels, dimes, and saving my money that way. And I saved for a long time. And then finally was actually able to go and buy this train set. Like I achieved it, got the amount I needed. I think my parents probably chipped in some too. Looking at we found the receipt. I'm like, I'm pretty sure you guys chipped in some. But The idea that when you need money, you can go create your own is such a powerful thought to have. Like, you're not reliant on your employer for it. You don't have to wait for somebody to offer you a job or to pay you. You can go out there and create your own income, which feels limitless. Like, there's no limit to what you can do with that.
Mm. That's fantastic, Robin. A fantastic lesson instilled in you from your parents. And I particularly love that term as well. I mean, if I were to choose another term, there's several I would choose, but kidpreneur, I love that. And I had no idea that that was your own, creation as well in terms of that vocabulary. So that's really good. Um, and like you say, I just love the opportunities that are available now for content creation. I mean, I'm someone don't proclaim to be a tech expert, but, I've been able to, in the last now, I think 14, 15 months, get the podcast going and my Twitter account's going well. I've started to increase my output on Substack. But for any young person listening, well, to be fair, anyone of any age, just, the opportunities are there for you to kind of, use varied platforms to grow an income. And it's exciting. But no, I just going back to Tom, I love kidpreneur, and any parents listening with children, any young people listening, get out there and get creating. Really, really important to do so. So many opportunities that you can utilize. I'm just curious, would you be able to share with our listeners a little bit more about the process of writing a book? For example, how challenging was it, and what tips would you provide to any potential budding authors listening to this podcast episode?
Absolutely. I cannot for the life of me remember the source for this, but I remember reading some stat about the number of adults who have either written a book, like they've written it down on napkins, note paper, something like that, like they have a book in them, versus the number who actually go ahead and publish is like quite astounding. Like, I think it might be like 1 or 2% of book ideas ever actually get brought out into the world, which is really sad. I think that many of us view the idea of putting a book out there as this really large, difficult, almost elitist task to do. And just like technology has made content creation so much easier in so many different ways, bringing a book out is so much easier, I think, now than it ever has been in the past. I have 2 books. One is The Simple Startup, which is a workbook for teens and educators to use. And that was not independently published and not traditionally published. It was published through a small publication company called Choosify Publications. And so that was my first attempt into publishing. And then Endless for Money was a self-published book. And I had the idea in my head in like maybe December of 2020. And by November of 2021, the book was available on Amazon. So it was just under a year to go from idea to reality. The process was sketch out your ideas, get a first draft going, start sharing that draft with some people who can give you valuable feedback. So for me, I was very interested in the feedback of early childhood educators, parents, English teachers, just to make sure that my grammar was right. I threw it at some financial content creators as well to see like, what do you think about these core concepts I'm trying to introduce? Am I missing anything? Is there anything you think that's too difficult? And started, reshaping the letters. And once I was kind of there, like I had a decent idea and I was like, I think this is what it's going to look like. I hired an author coach in my case. Her name is MK Williams. Her brand is called Author Your Ambition. And she was fantastic for guiding me through the kind of nuts and bolts of getting a ISBN number, registering with the Library of Congress, like how do you upload your book to Amazon or to Ingram Spark, which is how you self-publish. So they do print on demand publishing. And that was very valuable. And I think it just accelerated my process a little bit to do that. And once I had that kind of stuff going, it was finding an illustrator next. So for a children's book, an illustrator is probably the most important part of the book. Like, I feel like it's unfair that the illustrator gets so much less credit than the author does in children's books, because they are rock stars. And the illustrations in Endless for Money, I think, are beautiful and very detailed in what they put in there and really make the book what it is. And the illustrator is FX and Color Studio, which is an illustration studio in India. And huge shout out to them. So once I had my illustrator locked down, I kind of did a job post for them on Facebook. So there's a lot of author Facebook groups that you can go into, and illustrator Facebook groups. And I basically created a job post saying like, this is what the book is about. This is what I want my readers to come away with. These are the types of scenes that I'm imagining in my head. So it's like, I want indoor scenes like inside houses, banks, grocery stores, things like that. So I wanted an illustrator who was confident doing all those things. I said I wanted a very diverse cast of characters, with the goal that as many kids as possible would be able to see someone who looked like them, who felt like them, who had the same family structure as them, like that they could identify with some character in the book. And I ended up doing a couple of, I guess, investigations with a few illustrators who came back and said they were interested, and we narrowed it down to 3. We interviewed each of those, we got the pricing, and we're like, okay, we're going to go with this guy. And once we had the illustrator, I mean, that it's kind of like you hand it over to them and you say, like, here you go, like the text is pretty much done. I start focusing on other parts of the book. So in my case, I did a Kickstarter for mine. For anyone who's not familiar, Kickstarter is a crowdfunding platform. So it's not quite GoFundMe. GoFundMe would be for donations. Kickstarter is more for, you want to be an early adopter of an idea. So you go on to Kickstarter, you say, here's my idea, or here's what I want to create. Are you interested in being one of the first owners of this item? And almost like an investor, but you're going to actually get the item early, or a special version of it or something like that, as a reward for being one of the first people to invest in it. And so I use Kickstarter to completely fund the book. So start to finish, all the illustrations, all the author coaches, stuff like that, like totally covered by the Kickstarter, which was an awesome thing to be able to say I could do.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, that process is fascinating, and I love that whole concept of remind me again, is it author your ambition? Is that what you mentioned, Rob? Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, I'm a big advocate of, mentors, within a range of ways, within the world of education and investing, and but just in terms of that process of authoring a book, it perhaps can seem a little bit overwhelming in terms of the whole process, and particularly a children's book, making sure that you choose the correct illustrator, but just that whole process. You mentioned Ingram Sparks and get an ISBN number and so on, but just that's the idea of author your ambition. I think it's fantastic. I really do. Brilliant. So I have a 7-year-old son, like I think I mentioned at the top of the episode, and there's a copy of M is for Money on his bookshelf. So in addition to reading your book, Rob, are there any other suggestions that you have for developing his financial literacy?
Yeah, and at the back of the book, there is a parent section as well. So like there are some tips for parents for like, here's how you can use the book to really get the most out of it in terms of the financial education for your child. So it's a leveled book. So you won't do every part of it in the beginning. Your youngest kids might just be focusing on letter recognition and the word, and they will build up to the definitions and being able to answer Stash's questions. So it's a book that can grow with your kid. But other things that you can do besides introducing great books is to be a great role model, of course. So you want to demonstrate the things that you want your kids to learn about money. So in my son's case, he is an absolute sponge for everything that we do. So we really try to emphasize with him that we are planning how our money is spent. We don't spend whimsically, or when we walk into the grocery store, there is a set list of things that we are there to get, and we avoid just pulling things randomly off the shelf. When we go do big purchases, that we've planned for it, we've saved for it, and then we go and buy the thing that we have saved for, and we celebrate the fact that we did that. And play is a huge thing too. So you can show kids what to do, you can talk to them about what to do, and you can give them the experiences of how to do it. And play is one of the first ways that your kids are going to learn. Now your 7-year-old is probably ready for a little bit more, but in my case, the 3-year-old, all he needs is like a play cash register, some fake food, and we play grocery store all the time, where he gives me a list of things to go buy. I go with my shopping cart, he checks them out at the cash register, tells me how much it is. We pay with cash or credit card, and then he gives me a little receipt as well. And we've totally simulated the entire buying process, like how it works. You have to pay for things, you have to exchange money for what you want. We can talk about then, where does that money come from? What do you have to do to make money? How much is something? Is it expensive or not expensive? And that's been how my son has been learning about money so far. And it's just play. It's just engaging in conversations with him when he brings it up, or if you notice that his play is starting to have like a money theme to it, like just kind of saying, tell me more about that. Like, what's going on with that? What do you think happens here? And just sort of like building it into that everyday language and vocabulary in your household.
I think that's great, Rob. I really do. And going back to what you said a little while ago, I love what you mentioned about the intentionality of a shopping trip. So rather than being whimsical, to use the term that you use, rather than being whimsical and randomly taking certain items off the shelf, to go into a store with intentionality. Okay, we're going to choose these 4 or 5 items. This is what we'd like to buy. And I just think that's a great idea of just being really, truly intentional and not being so spontaneous and spreading what we're purchasing. And yeah, and going back to what you say about your 3-year-old, I have a 4-year-old, and it's something that my wife and I like to do as well. In terms of that whole concept of play, my wife is actually an early childhood educator, so that's something we really truly embed within our household. And again, in terms of M is for money, you got the kind of nod of approval from my wife, Mrs. Sloth, as I sometimes referred to in the podcast show. She's a fan of the book as well, and just in terms of the illustrations and content, just her being an early childhood educator, it's something that she has really recommended to her colleagues as well. So definitely so. Moving from young people, moving from kids, moving from children to adults, and perhaps teenagers and adults in general. What do you think? Do you have any particular financially themed books for teenagers or adults that you would recommend?
So there's more coming out every single year. Every couple of months, I'm starting to see new books that are themed towards kind of for us, it's middle school. So you're talking like you're 10 to 16, like that age group really just didn't seem to have much. There was a couple more kids books, color picture books, similar to M's for Money. There's some young adult books that are introducing money topics, and like you think about like Millionaire Next Door or The Richest Man in Babylon, that those books are kind of appropriate for that age group if you want to start there. But the 10 to 16-year-old range was sort of lacking, and yeah, there's definitely some good ones coming out. So there is 2 books that are by the same publisher, so they have a similar kind of look. One is called Investing for Kids, and the other is Investing for Teens. Both are very well done in terms of their visual appeal, engaging for kids, that sort of thing. I would say I love Dan Sheik's book. There's 2 of them. There's a book and there's a workbook, but it's called First to a Million. Mm-hmm. And this is a teenager's guide to like basically building wealth and financial independence. And what's really interesting about his take is that he is very into real estate investing and does mentorship groups for young people to help them like begin that journey of real estate investing from a very young age. So I see that kind of flavor coming into his work a little bit. But a fantastic book for teens to read. There is, a book called The Latte Factor by David Bach, which is definitely made for a younger audience. Small book, easy one if you have a kid who maybe isn't the most excited about reading, but might be interested in like getting started. So like more of a story that has money lessons built into it. And then there was a book by Will Rainey, and I'm totally blanking on the name of the book, which is terrible.
That's okay. Grandpa's Fortune Fables.
Fortune Fables. Thank you so much. Yes, that is a brilliant book. I think it is the best one I have seen for that age group. So Grandpa's Fortune Fables, Will Rainey, another UK writer, living abroad though now. I think he's living in Vietnam at the moment. But brilliant book, perfect for that 13 to 17-year-old age range. Told in like a comparable format about this girl, Gail, and her grandpa, who's sharing all of this wisdom from his life's journey to building wealth. And it's just a book that any kid could pick up and read, and they would just absorb these financial lessons from reading it.
Fantastic. Great section of books then. Quite a few that I'm unfamiliar with, I must admit. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of digging later on into those books. Fantastic. And yeah, to echo your comments about Grandpa's Fortune Fables, that's another book that's on my son's bookshelf. It's going to take another few years, I think, before I read it to him, but I just had to get it. I mean, as soon as I read kind of the thesis and I read kind of a blurb of the book, I thought, wow, this is fantastic, and really, really well laid out, really well structured indeed. So Rob, I understand that you're familiar with my 5 bedrock principles, so being simplicity, low fees, owning the world, time, and headstrong. And I just wondered, of those 5 bedrock principles, are there any that particularly strongly resonate with you?
I was talking to my kids, I mean my students, about this yesterday. There's a wonderful online game that we play called Build Your Stacks, and it's 20 years of investing in 20 minutes. It's free if anyone ever wants to play it. It's buildyourstacks.com. Don't put www in there because the link doesn't work if you do that. And you're given, a regular income paycheck, and you have to choose how to invest it. And there's like savings accounts, bonds, money markets, index funds, stocks, gold. Like there's a whole bunch of different things you can invest in. And the conclusion that we're drawing is that if you try and overcomplicate it, it doesn't work very well. There's too many wheels spinning at once, and it's hard to keep track of it all. And you end up just kind of selling the wrong time, buying the wrong time. So simplicity is definitely that theme that's coming out of it. I think headstrong as well is one that I'm really trying to impart to my kids. We're going to talk when we get to investing about creating an investor policy statement of here's what I'm going to do, here's when I'm going to do it, here's how much I'm going to put in, and here's what I will do if XYZ happens. So when times are good and you're clear-headed, you're making that plan for how I'm going to invest my money. What am I going to do if the market downturns? What happens if this shiny new thing comes on the market, like a cryptocurrency or NFTs or I bonds or whatever it is? Like, is there a way that I'm going to evaluate those for deciding whether it is a good idea or not? Or can I dabble with part of my money in these more speculative things? Or am I saying, no, it's just index funds the whole way? And I don't think there's anything wrong with making it a bit more complicated, but certainly being that headstrong and direct to yourself in terms of what you're going to do and how you're going to invest is, I think, the one that stands out to me.
Rob, I love the idea of kind of working alongside people, particularly young people, and anticipating potential pitfalls, because we all know, it's not always, a straight upwards line in terms of investing. There can be hurdles. It's been, a volatile year in the stock market in 2022. And I just love the idea of kind of like engaging in that pre-thinking process and think, okay, this could happen. And we look at history and, this event could occur and, certain black swan events, and we never know what, the geopolitical realm is going to throw up. So I think it's really important to do that. I love that process that you're elaborated upon there. So Rob, in terms of people finding out more about the book and purchasing, and perhaps more about you, do you have a website? How can people kind of access you and follow you on social media? Would you like to perhaps, as we come into the last stages of the episode, comment a bit upon that? How can people reach you and find out more about you?
Yeah, thank you so much. So you can find most information about me at misformoneybook.com. Parents, there are some great resources in there, such as like printable games and activities that you can do at home that have a money theme to them. So if you're like looking for some fun ways to introduce money into your household, like I have a matching memory game that just has money pictures and money related things on it. There's word scrambles. There's a whole variety of things. You can build your own little money box. If kids need like a savings container and you don't have like the ability to go out and get one right now, or you want them to make their own, like there's a template for how to make one out of just plain cardstock or turn a little milk carton into one. You can find my Instagram and Facebook and Twitter there as well. So on Instagram, I am at M's for Money Book. On Facebook, it's also at M's for Money Book, but on Twitter, I go by at Fi Educator, F-I Educator. Just a throw out reference to the fact that I'm a teacher who is teaching about financial independence.
Brilliant. Fantastic, Rob. Fantastic. To all the listeners, I am looking to begin a book giveaway program, and I'm going to be talking more about this in upcoming episodes of the Sloth Investor podcast and also via my Substack. And Rob's book is the first book that I'm looking to give away. So more information about that if you read my Substack, and if you listen to my next podcast, I'm going to be giving more details about how you can win a free copy of Rob's book, because it definitely needs to be read. It's a fantastic book, so illuminating, and Rob, for me, just hits the sweet spot in terms of the content, in terms of the vocabulary choices, the illustration, stash, of course, so many fine concepts, so many fantastic elements. So it's been a real pleasure talking to you, Rob. I've really enjoyed getting to know more about you and the background. And any final comments, anything else you'd like to add on your part?
No, I've had a great time being here. I love the conversation. Love getting to be on the Sloth podcast, Sloth Investor podcast. I'm sorry. It's wonderful to meet all these people who are doing the same kind of ideas: financial literacy, financial independence, investing in a smart, responsible way, but everyone has a different way of doing it, different voice. And that's what we should do with all of these kinds of materials. So M is for Money may be the right book for your child, or it may not be. There are lots of different books out there, and I encourage you to sample them. And the great thing about kids' books is that you can have a whole variety of them on a bookshelf. It's not like adults where you kind of feel like, I'm probably only going to buy maybe one or two self-help books about money. Like kids' books, like you can have hundreds of them, and the kids will be delighted.
Yeah, absolutely agree, Rob. And that's a great way to round up the episode. Just again, just thinking about what is right for your child, what's their particular interests, and there's such a broad selection out there. And just have those conversations, like you say, have those conversations with your child as well about money from a young age. Really critically important to do. Okay, all right, listeners, I'm going to round things off there, and I hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll say so long for now. So long, everyone.
Bye.
For more tips, follow the Sloth Investor on Twitter at Sloth_Investor.